Hi, dear friends and cultural creatives, Bruce Lipton here. I am delighted that the Source of Synergy Foundation has asked me to be here with you today as we honor the brightest stars guiding the evolution of human civilization, Ervin Laszlo. To understand the role of these upstanding humanitarians, I would like to offer the story of Metamorphosis, wherein a caterpillar transforms itself into a butterfly. A caterpillar, like a human or any other animal, represents a coherent community of sentient cells, each cell resembling a miniature person. The billions of cells that comprise a caterpillar provide for its structure and its life functions. The caterpillar is one of the most voracious of all organisms. When seated on a plant, a caterpillar will devour all the leaves until there is no more food available. At this point, the caterpillar stops its destructive behavior and encases itself in a cocoon. In this cocoon, the shutdown functions of the caterpillar leaves the cellular community out of work. With no work and no jobs, the structure of the community starts to fall apart. Chaos ensues. However, within this chaos of dissociated cells are specialized cells called imaginal cells, who offer a different vision of society and guides that cellular community to regroup into a higher level of organization, creating a butterfly and an organism that has the lightest touch on the environment. Human civilization is like that voracious caterpillar. We have destroyed and undermined the web of life and precipitated our own extinction. To survive, civilization must transform. It must undergo a metamorphosis, but how? To answer that, our community has been blessed with profoundly important human imaginal cells, provided civilization with empowering knowledge and guidance to manifest a healthy, happy, and sustainable world. So it is with deepest gratitude and appreciation on behalf of civilization that we thank you, Ervin Laszlo. Congratulations. Love to you.
To introduce this segment of the program, Emanuel Kunzelman is a social entrepreneur and environmentalist. He's founder of the nonprofit Green Heart International and a co-creator of the Global Purpose Movement. And he serves on the International Advisory Council of the Laszlo Institute for New Paradigm Research. Laura Rose is CEO of Green Heart International, promoting global cultural exchange. And together they organized a 2016 tribute to Dr. Laszlo in Chicago called Pioneer of the New Paradigm, a wonderful title for our awardee today. Emanuel Kunzelman and Laura Rose.
It's an honor to be here today to introduce Ervin. And what can you say in a minute or two about the man whose genius has transformed society over a half a century, taking us from the old Newtonian world into the quantum world, who took us on an evolutionary journey for this last half century, showing us the system's view of the world, the grand synthesis of evolution, having the boldness and courage to propose the Akashic field and how that works with science. And something close to my heart, showing us that it's a purposeful universe and an intelligent cosmos. And then he's moved on to macro shift and how you can change the world. And now taking us full circle to the immortal mind, to reconnecting to the source, to the global shift now, and the wisdom principles. Ervin Laszlo has provided an artistic form. He's a great concert pianist, a cultural form, a systems form, a philosophical underpinning of the greatest transition of all times. And what's more, he's a dear man that I'm so honored to know and call my friend. And Ervin, of all your great genius, we ask you now to spread your genius to one more category, to make the foundation of your legacy within the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research a loving testimony to your contributions to humanity. It's an honor to know you, to call you a friend, and to be here today and introduce Ervin Laszlo to the most deserving award, Superstar Award.
This piano used to belong to Bartók and to his wife. It's a wonderful piano, it's beautifully kept, because somehow the spirit of Bartók is in the instrument.
Now a world-renowned philosopher and scientist, in his youth, Dr. Ervin Laszlo was a brilliant pianist. At the age of 5, his first recital. At 7, he was admitted to the Franz Liszt Academy. At 9, he performed with the Budapest Philharmonic. At 15, Laszlo was awarded the Grand Prix at the Geneva International Music Competition. On his first trip to the United States, he caused a great stir as a child prodigy. In his late 20s, while still performing, Laszlo studied physics and philosophy at Columbia University. He later received a doctorate for his thesis on systems philosophy. A major turning point in the life of this popular pianist came in 1961, following a concert he gave at The Hague in Holland.
The change in my life, of my vocation really, came about through a series of accidental events. After I finished playing a recital, and the gentleman next to me started talking about philosophical questions, issues of how we understand society, what is the relation of society to nature, what about the future, and so on. And of course, by this time, for several years, I have been always traveling with my notebook. I wrote by hand, I wrote down my thoughts. And I did it for myself. And he asked me if I made some notes, and I said yes. And I gave it to him. Then I started talking with other people, and the next time I looked around, he was not there anymore, you know. And I didn't know who he was, this gentleman. So next morning, my breakfast, almost at the same table as we were sitting the night before, this gentleman showed up with his notes under his arm, and he said, I'm an editor of a publishing house. And I read it, and this publishing house would like to publish it.
The book, Essential Society, was well received, and he was invited to lecture at universities and research facilities around the world. Dr. Laszlo ended his career as a concert pianist at the age of 33. Setting out on a new path as a researcher and teacher at Yale University. Dr. Laszlo gained fame for exploring new territory. He focused on the evolution of our minds and spirits, and on the existence of invisible forces that connect the natural world. With a deep understanding of science, he published one novel theory after another. In the 1970s, he contributed to the Club of Rome report. In the 80s, Dr. Laszlo devoted his energies to world peace and economic development as a director at the UN Institute for Training and Research. In 1993, Dr. Laszlo founded the Club of Budapest, made up of leading intellectuals from around the world. The club has more than 50 honorary members, artists, scientists, and religious leaders, including 7 recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize.
We have here, going from below, is Sir Arthur Clarke, who wrote the 2002 Space Odyssey. And he is, of course, supporting, and he has written a preface also to our report.
During his tenure at the United Nations, Dr. Laszlo resolved to establish this club. Meeting with politicians and ambassadors, he came to feel deeply that to overcome the crises we are now facing, the spirits of individuals must be enlightened. he called upon artists, scientists, and religious leaders with their rich sensitivity and powers of persuasion.
We have several former presidents, like Gorbachev, like Václav Havel. Of course, everybody knows the Dalai Lama. Together with him, we have written the Manifesto on Planetary Consciousness.
My name is Alan Steinfeld, and I have a very special interview today with Ervin Laszlo. And if you don't know him, he is a founding mind in understanding the bridge between science and spirituality. And he has many books out. He's known as a Hungarian philosopher of science, a systems theorist, an integral theorist. He was a classical pianist, and he was also nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice, which is very impressive, Ervin. He is a real bridge between science and spirituality and takes in this whole understanding of the non-local field. And we're going to be talking about that. He has many books out talking about the Akasha and the Akashic. So Ervin, thanks for being here at Contact in the Desert. And I want to ask you first, coming from a kind of traditional background, how did you get involved in an understanding of the mixing of spirit, mind, consciousness, and science? Where did the origins of that sort of integration come from?
Well, precisely. I don't come from a traditional background, actually. I was a child prodigy in music on the piano. And I made my living as a professional pianist until I was in my mid-30s. I hardly attended any university up till that time. It's all caught up after that. So the experience of music and being a musician is one of a very integral experience, or one of feeling oneself in a meaningful universe, as it were. I mean, in a great piece of music, everything has meaning, everything follows logically. And the experience, when it's well interpreted, and when the audience also is responsive, and the experience is one of intense meaning, where everything has a significance. And then I was looking for this kind of significance also when I started inquiring into what it could be, its source. And then I turned to science, to reading Whitehead and the process philosophers and Bergson and the others, and the evolutionary thinkers. So I was looking always for the origins or the source of an experience of oneness and wholeness and meaning. And later on, I realized that it's the same experience that we have when we have a true unconditional love. So I was always looking for that in science, and I found it, of course, more and more, first in the process thinkers, then in the new physics, new cosmology, and then in the quantum sciences. So here we have a world that isn't so distinct from spirituality. It is practically spirituality in a scientific form.
Yeah, so talk about the idea that you've come up with as the quantum mind. What does that actually mean?
I know, I talk about quantum consciousness, it's the same thing.
Yes, quantum.
Yes. Well, I just mean that when we are conscious of ourselves and of the world around us, then it's not a separate thing. First of all, it's not separate from the body, but it's also not produced by the body. That it's something more embracing, more inclusive. The whole universe is a quantum system, and our consciousness of this quantum universe is a quantum consciousness. So it's a different view of the world. The view of the world that is now promoted or prompted or supported by the discoveries on the field of quantum physics, the microphysics, as well as the cosmology. A whole new worldview, as you well know, is emerging. And it's not a classical worldview, it's not a traditional worldview. It's a highly integral and meaningful and interconnected view of the world.
Right. So it's basically, I think you're saying consciousness is non-local. What?
Absolutely.
Right. And so This is a festival or a conference about other life forms, other intelligences. How do you think, I mean, if consciousness is non-local, then of course it's not just here on this planet. What do you feel the connection to other life forms and other worlds, other parallel universes? How can we contact that? How can we connect with those other consciousnesses?
Well, think of it. What follows from the idea that consciousness is non-local means that it's not just here and now. And it's not just a side effect of the workings of the brain. Consciousness is the universe. The universe is a consciousness, as it were. And therefore, our individual consciousness is a fragment of that. It's a fractal, if you think, actually.
Yeah.
Because it reflects, it contains everything that the whole universe consciousness contains. We are a part of cosmic consciousness. This consciousness which is present in the world, but it's not separate from the world. The whole world ultimately is a cosmic consciousness. That is increasingly the view to which I'm coming. Obviously, we have access. Through our consciousness, we have access to all other elements of that consciousness. We are a quantum element. We are a, what's the word I want, where everything is included in everything else.
Yeah, all inclusive. Yeah, I mean.
Yes, we have a microcosmos that includes the macrocosmos.
But
and therefore we can go into us, in ourselves. We discover, we find everything which is in the world. It's present there. It's just a matter of the depths at which we can go into this consciousness, which is not just our consciousness, which is the consciousness of the world.
But it seems like most people are conditioned, they're limited by their thinking, they live in a very small aspect of consciousness. How can you help people expand to know that we're something bigger, that we're part of that?
Well, I mean, great thinkers like William James
mm-hmm.
and then Albert Einstein have been, and Erwin Schrödinger have been telling us in very clear terms
mm-hmm.
that the consciousness is not something that can exist in the plural. There are not several consciousnesses.
Right.
That basically there is one consciousness of which we are a part. Einstein said it very clearly. It's only our training or our background experience that prompts us to separate, to think of things as being separate, to think of us being separate from the world.
Mm-hmm.
So the new view is an inclusive view. Think of the totality of all things as being a parametric whole, as being a oneness in which all elements are present. If you do that, then of course, you don't see yourself as being separate from other than things around us. And that is being confirmed in quantum science. There is no such thing as being completely apart from,
mm-hmm.
because we are all basically elements in this cosmic field, which the ancients called the Akasha.
Right.
And therefore I call it the Akashic field.
But the modality of thought is probably different. Like we think in a certain way with certain language and a certain structure of this consciousness. Would other beings think in a different framework, different patterns of thinking, and how would we access those outside the limitations we have been put in? Of course, people like Einstein and Schrödinger, they have, but how would most people listening to this expand to meet other beings in other realms with other ways of thinking? Yeah.
Well, we have to allow this innate knowledge to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you can force. We have to sense it, experience it. One thing is to get the framework for it from science, the argument for it, that it exists. But it's a deeper thing to experience it. And great artists and writers, they experience it. That's why it comes to the root of inspiration is always the experience of this wholeness and being part of a wholeness, being part of a cosmic hologram. That is really what I was trying to say. A hologram in which all elements are present at all points. We know this from our experience, we can create holograms like this. But in the current conception, we can conceive of the entire universe as a hologram. And that seems to be the most logical conception, the most appropriate to our experience. Not our everyday separate experience, but our deeper experience. Our experience that comes, because this is what you're asking about, it comes in meditation, comes with aesthetic experience. It comes from the recognition that you can, facing a higher truth, something that is really, finally you can come across and you can say, aha, this is the way things are. When you have this kind of experience, then everything is one, everything is meaningful, everything is whole, and ultimately it is the kind of universe that the quantum field physics and the quantum cosmology now tells us is the real universe.
Right. Thank you for that. I just want to quote what you wrote for your endorsement of my book, Waking Contact, which I appreciate. You said, why maintain the incredible sophistry that we are alone in the universe? What else is unique in the universe? The laws of nature and the phenomena they produce are not. They are universal and ubiquitous. So is life, even intelligent life. There is no chance events in space, time, and no cosmic exceptions. Can you share about your non-local mind?
To me, it comes in a more kind of rationalized way, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the raw experience, it's the meaning of the experience.
Right.
And it's the meaning when you experience music, when you play it, of course, but also when you can listen to it and feel yourself, be entering into it, allow it to enter into you. And any kind of a great experience of nature, for example, is that kind of an experience. If you can just allow it, just let it flow. And I think we realize that what physicists are telling us as the basis of quantum experiments and of their cosmology, that is something that is true because we can experience it. So my experience has been sort of recognizing if and when I'm inquiring in the right way. Then it's almost like I'm getting a prompt. This is the way things are likely to be. This is the way I should inquire. And I have the negative influence response as well sometimes. Well, no, this is not a fruitful way to go. Try to go deeper. And so I'm being prompted to look into the deepest levels and allow the experience to flow from it. What I wrote for your book, I'm convinced of it more than ever. I mean, it's incredible sophistry to think that we will be alone in the universe. How come nothing else is unique to this planet? We used to think that this planet is unique in its position. And it turns out that there are hundreds of thousands, and in fact, myriads of planets in this galaxy. And we don't know how many but myriad other galaxies have planets orbiting their stars with a basically similar condition that allows a carbon-based life to emerge. That means life based on carbon chains. Obviously. Life must exist. It's logical. To deny it is almost like solipsism in philosophy, which says, I am, I exist, but everything else is just an element of my experience. It's no longer tenable, actually. And also very likely, I think, it's extremely plausible that there are intelligent forms of life, because evolution seems to be a universal phenomenon. And evolution on the quantum, on the atomic, on the molecular, on the supramolecular, cellular levels, ecological levels, all appears to be a universal process. a single evolutionary process moving forward toward higher and higher levels of complexity and coherence. Let me emphasize that word coherence. I think I'm increasingly talking about it as being more and more important. That the world is coherent, said Einstein, is some of the most remarkable thing about it, the most magical, miraculous thing about it. Because things are not just haphazard, not just casual. Things have an inner logic which is moving forward, a drive. You know, as the young people say, be the force, may the force be with you. See?
Right.
Yes, there is a force, and it's the force of evolution. And that force is in us. It's what the great religious, spiritual systems identify as a divinity, as a God or a great spirit, as a Tao, as a Jabe, whatever name we give it. But it is the spark that spiritual people talk about that is in us.
Right.
And that, of course, is present, not only in us, wherever life emerges, it's present. Because it is what creates life. It is the drive toward wholeness, coherence, which is in the universe, but because we are part of this holographic universe, it's also in us.
Yeah, Bohm called it the implicate order. And do you think, you know, we're at the verge of the government, US government, admitting that there is other life, that we are being visited. Does that increase the level of coherence as we know the greater universe exists? I mean, because there's always more and more levels of coherence, right? So,
yes.
So
I had the good fortune to be a good friend of the Apollo 11 astronaut, Mitchell.
Yes.
And I don't think he was even meant to really break any secrets, but he told me more or less in his confidence. Now we can say it, of course, also to anybody. There is that he witnessed evidence of extraterrestrial life, you know, and intelligent life as well. See?
Right.
I think that's absolutely logical. And the great task, of course, is to enter into contact, not trying to reduce it to our level and think that we can communicate and with beings that are on our level. They could be on very different levels. The universe is a big place. The numbers that we are now coming forth in cosmology are incredibly large. 100 years ago, we thought what today we know as the galaxy is the totality of the universe. Now we only know that it's one of billions of galaxies. And every galaxy has billions of stars. So in this universe, the life is emerging and it's evolving constantly. And it's moving toward higher levels of coherence, complexity. And that means receiving and communicating signals by which these forms of intelligent life can communicate with one another. That is a logical assumption. If we don't find it as yet, it's probably because we are trying to find it on our own level, in our own very restricted levels.
Right.
But if you would allow it to come, I think the great inspirations always stem from a deeper understanding, and the deeper understanding is not alone from this humanity, from this planet. This deeper understanding is the inflow of consciousnesses, of intelligences that are beyond anywhere in the great wide world, because space and time have a different meaning in what you mentioned very nicely about David Bohm's idea of the implicate order. What is basically a Platonic or deep dimension, the dimension of the forms, the ideas, where the soul resides. You know, this was 2,500 years ago. And 3,500 and 5,000 years ago, even going back, the concept of an Akashic dimension was already known and discussed. So this, not a new idea, but we have suppressed it because we try to reduce everything to our everyday reality to make it seem like the universe is like us, or we are like the universe. But of course we are, but on a deeper level, not on the surface.
Right. Yeah, that's been the problem, I think, that we think our ordinary consciousness is all that there is. I mean, you're very familiar with the work of Anthony Peake, who will be at this conference as well. And these altered states of being. And my experience meeting these ETs in dream states shifts consciousness. There's an alteredness to other beingness. You know, even people sometimes you meet and their thinking is so different that there's a kind of a vibratory effect on our consciousness. You talk about that in relationship to the immortal mind. And I was just looking at some of the notes that you have on the immortal mind. Can you talk about that aspects of shifting consciousness, deja vu, dreams, all these in terms of this greater field and how it takes different forms? Yeah.
Well, I mean, besides that, there are a lot of these experiences. You mentioned Anthony Peake.
Yeah.
It's Tony Peake. I wrote this book that is titled The Immortal Mind. And he has collected a lot of stories, accounts of these kind of experiences which go beyond the ordinary, which is beyond space and time, actually. There are also experiences of reincarnation, of a continuity of mind, of consciousness beyond the body. And that is now a whole big branch of inquiry, looking for the science of beyond the brain. I think you're right, it does have an effect.
Yeah.
If one has an experience like this, it changes you, it changes the way you think. I've had a very remarkable experience. An old Italian, very everyday kind of a very simple person, farmer, called Bacci in Tuscany. He has had a laboratory. Yeah, there is a studio, a room where he can go once in a while, at certain times in the afternoon or evening. And funny things are happening. You can talk to people who are dead. Huh. And I was taken over there to meet with him, and I had this experience of as soon as I come into the room, things started manifesting themselves, you know. There were little things falling from the ceiling, but there was nothing on the ceiling. And they were all around us, you know, little hard crystal-like things. And then when we entered and he used a very old-fashioned thermal vacuum tube radio on the old kinds, you know, that crackles a lot. And he tunes it into a white noise frequency where just only noises, you know. And in this noise, as he kind of patted the radio or just moved his hands around it over it, things we began to hear something, not only this crackled static, you know. We began to hear some sounds as though it was some speech. And then gradually they clarified. And the speech were persons. And they could ask questions. And I could ask questions like, are you the dead? Did I know you? Did you know me? You know, why are we here? You know, and it went on for 20, 25, 30 minutes perhaps.
What kind of answers did you get when you asked?
And this kind of answers that, of course, I said, how come you speak Hungarian? Because that's what the funny thing was, that the voices started talking Hungarian. And of course, Bacci, this Italian, the medium, doesn't know anything, any language other than Italian. And I said, how come that you come up with Hungarian? So I remember the answer was, we speak all the languages. There are no barriers. And so I came away with this feeling of that meeting, yes, that I was talking to people who were defunct. I had lost my mother at that point, not too much earlier, a couple of years earlier, and I was trying to be in touch with her. I have not succeeded on this instant, but I could talk to people who said they knew me, knew my mother.
Right.
And so I have very little doubts that this was not produced by Bacci. There's not any exposition or capability to do that. That there is something which is not the ordinary, not the natural. You can call it the supernatural if you like, but it's very much part of this world. I think it's a deeper dimension of this world. Right. These phenomena no longer take place. I don't know, I think Bacci became old. And it's no longer happening to him. It may be happening elsewhere. But I had this experience, and I had other experiences also, but nothing as lucid as this one.
Well, some people would just call that mystical or, supernatural, but there's a science to this, like, right? This is not, just labeled as mystical and inexplicable. We need to create the science of these other levels of manifestation. How would you propose we go about doing that?
Well, I mean, I take reference here to frequencies, the frequency domains of vibration. It's part of this new paradigm, the quantum paradigm, is that we think of the world not as made up of little hard units called atoms or quanta, but made up of vibratory phenomena, of vibrations, clusters of vibration, which occur at different frequencies. And the vibrations that occur on one domain of frequencies provide us with the phenomenon of the observable world. There's higher domains of vibration take us in beyond the everyday, the perceptions of the everyday observable world. It can take us into a deeper domain. I'm convinced, by the way, that this deeper domain, the frequencies are not higher, but they are lower than the normal. When we enter into what the EEG pattern shows us, is a meditative altered state of consciousness that occurs at the alpha level and below the alpha level, at the theta level and the beta. So these are all ways that we can approach it. Yes, indeed, it's all vibration. You might say, what is there in the world? I would say there are clusters and superclusters of vibration. And these are semi-stable, they maintain themselves. Some may maintain themselves for practically for all times. They are not little hard units, not little billiard balls, like the Newtonian conception was.
You talked about being prompted, sort of intuitively directed sometimes. Is that
Yes.
that doorway to the greater mind that's always accessible to us?
Yes, I've had this experience even today. I'm trying to finish a little book that is actually a rewrite of some earlier works of mine, putting it together and trying to draw the conclusions. And as I read those earlier words, the sentences, the paragraphs, it comes to me, no, not like this, but like that,
Right.
And then I just don't hesitate. I keep writing and rewriting, and it just flows. So that's the experience. We call it guided, it's not really automatic writing, but it's a prompted, it's a guided phenomenon.
But by a higher aspect of our own consciousness, maybe a level of greater coherence, perhaps.
Yes, not from the outside, not by anything outside. But I think if we are in tune with this evolutionary drive, then many things fall into pattern and become meaningful.
I just want to talk a little bit about, you were nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize, and I want to talk about why, and also your modern theories of creating a better world. So can you put some of that together? Like, why do you feel you were selected to receive the Nobel Peace Prize?
Well, I don't know really, and I couldn't inquire, and that's fine, whatever sort of happens. But I just hope that the ideas that I try to represent receive attention. That is what I'm after. But I don't know. The main issue, I think, is that in the course of the last 200, 250 years, but even more than ever, last 50, 60 years, we have set off on a path of development, which is separate from the natural path, from the ecological, from the planetary, from the universal, from the cosmic path. It is a very willful path which depresses, suppresses a lot of our abilities to communicate, to be one. We are trusting it instead to electronic communication. And we are, instead of feeding ourselves, basically, with natural products. We are going increasingly into artificial products. Our health is maintained like that. Our daily diet is built like that. Our clothing is like that. We are altogether substituting, and in vain and not very successfully, for a natural ambience, a natural alignment with the world, an artificial alignment, which permits us some immediate satisfactions of our desires. Our desires, our wishes are already prompted by this worldview of the whole world is like us, or like a superficial us, not the implicate order, like the explicate order, right. The Boom would say. And of course, this experience reduces the scope of what we can actually experience, this attitude. We need to realign, recover, be reborn in the sense, or re-evolve, as you like. And any word is really at this present moment. Because we have gotten off to a wrong direction. Of course, not all of humanity, a lot of the humanity, of course, on the so-called simpler cultures or deeper or more ancient cultures have not gone off, but they are in danger of disappearing increasingly in the wave of this McDonaldization and Coca-Colanization, or whatever you will call it. You see, the artificial or Googling everything and just reducing everything to those single streams, simple and single streams of signals, of symbols by which we communicate. So getting back to realigning to a larger universe, to a larger sphere of existence. That, I think, is the task before us. And this task is facilitated by that crisis that we have been living through, and out of which we seem to be pulling out at last. Hopefully we are, but perhaps by the end of the year, more and more so. But it's losing up this belief in the human power of reducing everything to the immediate and to the here and now, and to the manifest hand to hand, that we can grasp by our hand, manifest by the hand. So I think this task of coming out of that fallacy, that wrong way, toward a new way, a better way, is the task that is now before us, and it's facilitated by the aftermath of this crisis, by the fact that we have been shaken up, that we have been shown that we are part of a single family where nothing is outside of it, where what happens to one can happen to the other, to all the others. So I think this is an exciting time, and my task is to try to give a scientific, rational explanation for this oneness which we feel, not by replacing it with explanations, but by having it, giving it greater credence, greater depth and understanding that we are indeed part of a cosmic mind, cosmic consciousness. We can interact on all levels, not only the superficial, bodily, manifest level.
Do you think the quantum thinking has to do with accessing the non-local field in a way where we're not collapsing the wave function into concretizing elements, but we live in a more abstracted, more inclusive, more cluster of meanings?
Well, this is another problem of the quantum measurement system, of collapsing the wave function. That's one way of explaining what happens when you interact with some elements of this wider field around us. And we believe that the reduced wave function, the simplified wave function of space and time is the real world. And that's a fallacy, because that's only a phenomena. The deeper reality is the implicate order. And it's out of that we can dip into, and out of that we can derive the inspiration and the knowledge, the basic understanding of the oneness, of the unseamless, fully accomplished, interacting oneness, which is the whole quantum universe.
So what do you think happens to the mind or the consciousness without the container of the body? Does it just disperse like a drop in the ocean? Does it retain its form? I mean, how do you understand that?
Well, that is, of course, one of the greatest question that we can ask. I think there is good evidence, and I'm increasingly convinced that this evidence is credible, that individuality, personality, the individual personality does not vanish with the disappearance of the body, of the death of the body. That individuality or identity survives in the form of vibrational fields. We are basically clusters of vibration. Our body is that in a different wavelengths, and our consciousness is in a different wavelengths from the body. Mm-hmm. But the wavelengths, the frequencies of the wavelengths of the body disappear doesn't mean that the consciousness, mind frequencies disappear. Mm. Yeah. It's a different level of the existence of this universe. Individual identity remains, and it remains an open system that is capable of reassociating with other body frequencies. To put it in a very fancy way, which is basically what you're talking about, this phenomenon of reincarnating again.
Well, some people say the soul retains those frequencies.
I don't like the term soul, but it's just personal because it's too loaded.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just so much things that the dogma and doctrines are over thousands of years are connected with it. I like to use consciousness, the cosmic consciousness and the fractals, the elements of consciousness, of which we are one. Mm-hmm. We are not a separate element, we are just an incorporated element of it. So what is retained is a particular kind of, maybe a unique kind of a combination of frequencies or vibration. But that is all that we are. Mm-hmm. Max Planck said it very clearly also, there is no such thing as matter itself in the universe. Matter is a phenomenon. Mm-hmm. It's something that emerges, something that we name it that when we come across something which seems to be stable or semi-stable, maintained. What there is ultimately is the constant flow and ebb of vibrations flowing, interacting, in producing higher and higher levels of integrity, information, and coherence. And that, I think, is the definition of evolution.
Seems like quantum physics as we know it is a kind of just in-between step, and these beings that seem to be appearing in these craft and moving in and out of space have been able to use consciousness somehow to manipulate time and space. Do you feel that's true, that we can understand a greater science of consciousness applied to quantum physics and manipulate time and space?
We can transcend time and space in the experience, what we call an altered state experience, the spiritual deep experiences. When we enter into the implicate order, or the Akashic field, if you like, then we are not in a space-time dimension. Right. So we are not manipulating per se. We are just doing without it. We are transcending it.
Any final words for people listening that you would like the world to know about the future, how to live, where we're going?
Let me quote Einstein again. He said, there are two ways to live your life, as if everything is a miracle or as if nothing is. And in a sense, I think as he came also to the conclusion that everything is a miracle, not an inexplicable miracle. We try to understand it, but the very fact that this is a coherent universe is a miracle. Why did the Big Bang not produce some simply just chaotic waves, patterns, and why did it produce increasingly integrated coherent systems, which is what our world is a system of coherent systems. So the final word is, live in a miraculous universe, accept that it is that, respect it, try to live up to it, and be the miracle in your action that you really ultimately are.
Thank you, Ervin Ervin Laszlo, founder of the Club of Budapest, a major think tank, a great contributor to the world of spirit and science. Thanks for your time and your passion to keep learning and exploring and sharing with the world everything you've gathered. And I'm sure everyone at Contact in the Desert appreciates that.
Thank you, Alan, for promoting and diffusing and disseminating these kind of notions, which we need to loosen up the hold of the old narrow thinking. And you're contributing to that. And that's a very important factor.
Thank you.
Work with you again.
Dearest Ervin, thank you for so generously sharing with all of us the overwhelming evidence for the continuity of consciousness, and that we are part of an interconnected Akashic field that holds the constant and enduring memory of an intelligent cosmos. We wish to express our gratitude to you for showing us that by reconnecting to the source, we can change ourselves and transform our world in the process. Your work continues to give us the confidence to step more fully into who we truly are. And in today's world where there's so much uncertainty, you offer us comfort that we are not alone, that we are connected to everyone and everything. This helps us to recalibrate our very being to become what we have been all along, extraordinary beings that are one with Source, directing our evolution upwards.
We live in an extremely critical time. Fear at this moment of our existence is rampant, it's very high. And pessimism is also rising in some quarters. Now that will be a self-defeating way to go. I don't think we need to be pessimistic. I don't think we need to be fearful. Indeed, as Roosevelt said, the only thing we need to fear is fear itself. So let me say why I think that these times are unique times in which we can look forward to something that has never been in the hands of any generation. Something which we could call building a new world, building a better world. When I look back from the beginning of my asking questions, what it is that was the keynote, the key element of my life. What I have found in all this time is that the world is miraculous because the universe is not a passive sphere of indifferently flowing time and passive space. It's a universe, is a field, an evolving field, as something that moves forward, something which encompasses all things, where all things are or can be together and are growing together. A universe which is incredibly coherent. Another thing that Einstein said, that what's the most remarkable thing is that the universe is so coherent that we can understand it. Those coherence could not have been the product of pure chance. The universe, 13.8 billion years, this evolutionary period, would not have been long enough to produce these coherent structures that range from the nucleus of atoms to the galaxies and to the metagalaxies and to life on some of the planets, certainly on Earth, but we believe probably in many other planets as well. This is a remarkable and miraculous universe. There are two elements of this miracle that particularly stuck in my mind and which I'd like to convey to you. One is that this universe evolves, and that it evolves not just smoothly, usually not smoothly. Very often it evolves through leaps and bounds, through crisis, sometimes catastrophes, but then through renewal. Complex systems are inherently, and this we know from physics, from thermodynamics, unstable systems. Sometimes a small little kick can move it out of a stable state and move it down toward decay and toward the lower levels of the evolutionary range, evolutionary scale, down to the molecular level, And that we call it death, the death of the organism, the survival only of those molecules that made up the organism. But this is not the total story. The total story of the evolution of the universe is one of progress. Progress by leaps, progress through discontinuities. And so one of the two things that I find which are so relevant, that the universe evolves through leaps. Lately, since then I've been looking at it in terms of science, we can call it a bifurcation. A bifurcation is a sudden change in the trajectory of a system. It doesn't evolve anymore as it used to. It evolves in some new way. And that way the system can renew itself. We are the product of multiple trajectories, multiple bifurcations. We have reached a point where we are a human society that possesses consciousness, that is also continuing to evolve, constantly facing new challenges. We are now facing an enormous challenge. And the second thing that I want to say is about this challenge. This challenge is a unique chance. All these bifurcations are chance, a chance, an opportunity to move forward. Without them, nothing would significantly change. Without these, probably we would be on the level of molecules and perhaps individual cells. But this complex organization could not have evolved on Earth and wherever else it evolves in the world without it being motivated by a constant drive towards higher integration, higher unity, higher movement to oneness. And this movement is across frontiers, across borders. These borders sometimes provide a challenge. The system either evolves further or it decays and disappears, moves to the lower level of organization, disappears as a living system. This is survive, evolve, or pass the stage of history. This is where we are at. What I want to say is, and want to stay brief, is that this chance that we have, this bifurcation that we have, which we call a global crisis, is a unique opportunity. Think of it in this way. Our world has become inherently unsustainable. That means that a multiple crisis would follow if we don't change it fundamentally. Multiple crises, whether it's the climate change, whether it's the migrant crisis, there's a sea level rise, whether it's the rise of big city violence, whether it's a rise of military and nuclear, perhaps a nuclear confrontation. We have a rich repertory of possibilities of global crisis. But if we don't change, one of these crises will come about. One of these crises will meet us, and it may spell an end of civilization in a way that will be very difficult to reverse. But it need not do so, because now we have a chance to change. And the change is through a global crisis that we can master. We must change fundamentally so that we become a master of our evolution. Last thing, but it's obvious, we can do this because we have something that no other species on Earth has. I would say consciousness, but it's not true because everything has consciousness. Every atom, every quantum has consciousness. But we have a level of consciousness that enables us to make a conscious choice, to choose the way we want to go forward. That's the tremendous plus of evolution. That's in our hands. Use that evolution, use that consciousness to bring evolution under the auspices, within the domain of possible mastery of our own future, of our own life. A unique chance, a new paradigm, yes. I've been talking about this, but I never knew that it's going to have such an incredible possibility of coming about. Because now more and more people, especially young people, realize that the old paradigm, the old way of living doesn't work. It has to change. One very, very last word. I'm sorry if I was a bit long. Very last word. What is it that makes us go forward? It's something in us. It's the same thing that makes the proton and the neutron join together in the nucleus of the hydrogen atom, and that attracts electrons into energy shells, that makes molecules, that makes crystals, that makes macromolecules and living cells and organisms and societies of organisms and ecologies and galaxies. It's the integrative force in the universe. This universe is a marvelous universe. It's a miraculous universe. I go back to where I started. I believe that we can live our life as if everything is a miracle, because everything is. And we are the greatest miracle of all. Let's make that miracle work so that life goes forward. Life on this planet will flourish, and humanity can rise to the next level of its evolution, to higher consciousness, ultimately toward the union to something higher, possibly a cosmic consciousness, possibly something that we call divine, something that we don't know but we can feel, and that is our destiny. That is our mission, and that is our purpose. And our chance to achieve it, to move toward it, is now. Thank you for your attention.